The most feared Korean mafia boss in Los Angeles just received a text from an 8-year-old girl begging him to save her life. And she has no idea who she just messaged. He has two choices: ignore it or become something he has never been. A protector. Like this video, drop your city in the comments and let's see how far this story travels. Now stay until the end, because this one will hit different. Motet. The rain came down hard that night, the kind that turned Los Angeles into something unrecognizable, washing the neon reflections off Wilshire Boulevard into long, bleeding streaks of red and gold across the asphalt. It was 11:53 in the evening, and Kang Ji-tae was sitting in the back of his black Genesis G90 with the interior lights off, the partition glass raised between him and his driver, a folder of financial documents open across his lap that he had not looked at in 20 minutes. He was thinking about a debt, not the kind measured in money. The car was parked outside a private restaurant in Koreatown, the kind with no sign above the door, and a host who recognized every face before it reached the threshold. Ji-tae had just concluded a 3-hour meeting with the heads of 2 rival distribution networks, men who smiled too much and blinked too little, and he had walked out with exactly what he came for: a signed agreement, a territorial boundary, and the quiet understanding that crossing either one would be catastrophic for whoever tried. His attorney would formalize the paperwork by morning. His enforcer, a thick-necked man named Do Sung-kyu, who everyone called Do, was standing outside the vehicle in the rain without an umbrella, because Ji-tae had told him years ago that umbrellas made a man look like he was hiding. Do did not argue. Nobody argued with Ji-tae. Not twice. Ji-tae was 41 years old, though most people who met him guessed older, not because of lines in his face, which were few, but because of the quality of stillness he carried. He had the kind of eyes that processed a room the way a camera processes light, completely, without emotion, storing everything. His hair was black, threaded with early gray at the temples, cut close on the sides, and he wore a charcoal suit that had cost more than most people in this city made in a month. He kept himself trim, not out of vanity, but out of discipline. The same reason he rose at 5 each morning, the same reason he had not taken a drink of alcohol in 11 years, the same reason every man who worked for him knew exactly what was expected and exactly what happened when expectations were not met. He had built the Korean Syndicate's Los Angeles operation from 12 men in a warehouse in Gardena into something that now employed over 300 people across 6 districts, with revenue streams running through legitimate restaurant and import businesses that even careful accountants could not fully untangle. He had done this through intelligence, patience, and a willingness to be the last man standing in rooms where most people eventually flinched. He had never been arrested. He had never been photographed by law enforcement in any context that mattered. He had never lost a territorial dispute that he had personally chosen to enter. He was, by any practical measure, untouchable. His phone buzzed against his thigh. He picked it up without urgency, expecting a message from his attorney or possibly from Do, who had a habit of texting from 10 feet away rather than knocking on the window. But the number on the screen was not in his contacts. It was a local area code, a 323 prefix, which covered South Los Angeles. The message was short. He read it once. Then he read it again, because the second time confirmed what the first time had made his brain resist. Please help us. He is going to hurt us bad. My mom's already bleeding. Please don't tell the police, he said. If we call police, he will kill her. Please, somebody help us. Ji-tae sat with the phone in his hand for 4 seconds without moving. He was not a man who received messages like this. The people who had his number were vetted, known, and understood the consequences of misuse. Whoever sent this had made an error, a wrong number, a desperate reach into the dark for anyone who might answer. The rational thing, the operationally sound thing, was to set the phone down and return to the financial documents. Someone else's domestic crisis was not his concern. He had not survived 23 years in this business by entangling himself in situations that had no strategic value. He typed back, "Wrong number." He set the phone down. He picked it back up 9 seconds later. The second message had arrived while he was putting the phone down, and the third arrived while he was reading the second. "Please, we are hiding in the closet upstairs. He has a knife. I saw it. Please, my name is Amara. I am 8. Please help me." Ji-tae stared at the name. Amara. 8 years old, hiding in a closet with her bleeding mother while a man with a knife moved through the house below them. Something moved in his chest. Not sentiment, he told himself. Not that. Something older and more structural than sentiment. Like a floor giving way under weight it was never meant to hold. He had a sudden and very specific image in his mind that he spent most of his waking hours keeping behind a door he never opened. A hallway, a different rain, a different city, a child's voice calling his name with a trust he had not deserved. He pushed the image back. He closed the door. Then he opened the car door and stepped out into the rain. Doe turned immediately, water running off the shoulders of his jacket. He was 6'2", built like a man who had once done something professional with his body and had never stopped. His expression shifted into operational readiness the moment he saw Jitai's face. "Where are we going?" Doe asked. Jitai was already looking at his phone, pulling up the number that had texted him, running it through the reverse lookup application his tech team had built into his private contact system. The address resolved in under 8 seconds. A street in South Los Angeles, off Figueroa. A residential district of apartment complexes and corner stores, roughly 14 minutes from where they were standing if the rain had not turned the 110 into a parking lot. "Get in," Jitai said. "Do I need to—" "No weapons. Get in." Doe got in without further question. That was what Jitai paid him for. Not the questions, but the absence of them at the right moments. Jitai typed one more message to the unknown number as the car pulled away from the curb. "I am coming. Stay hidden. Do not make noise. Do not open any doors until I knock 3 times. He did not know if she would understand that. He did not know if she was still in a position to read it. He stared at the message for a moment, then set the phone face down on the seat beside him and watched the rain-slicked streets of Koreatown give way to the freeway on-ramp, the city expanding and darkening around the car as they moved south. He was not a good man. He had never claimed to be. He had ordered things done that could not be undone, had looked away from consequences that he could have stopped with a single word, had built an empire on a foundation of controlled fear and calculated violence. He knew what he was. He had made a kind of peace with it, not the kind that came from forgiveness or resolution, but the simpler, grimmer kind that came from accepting that some debts could never be fully paid, and some doors, once opened, never closed again. But he had made a promise once, to someone who could no longer hold him to it. He had not honored that promise in any way that counted. His phone lit up again. A single word this time, in the halting punctuation of a child typing on a phone that was probably not hers, probably grabbed in a moment of terror, while the man with the knife was occupied somewhere else in the house. Okay, Jitai looked at that word for a long time. The apartment complex on Figueroa was a 3-story stucco building painted a yellow that had long since faded to the color of old teeth, with an iron security gate at the entrance and a row of metal mailboxes along the outer wall that had been pried open at some point and never repaired. A single sodium lamp above the parking lot cast everything in a flat orange light that made shadows look deeper than they were. 3 cars in the lot, none of them new, one of them with a cracked windshield held together with clear tape. Doe pulled the Genesis to the curb half a block down, the way Jitai preferred. Close enough to move, far enough to watch. Jitai sat looking at the building for a moment. 2nd floor, Unit 7, according to the address his system had pulled. The lights in the 2nd floor windows were off, which told him either the man had killed the lights deliberately or the woman had never turned them on in the first place. The front gate was closed. The intercom panel on the gate post had a cracked screen and would likely do nothing useful. "I'm going in," Jitai said. "If I'm not out in 20 minutes, call Sung Min and have him contact our man at the LAPD substation on Main. Tell him domestic disturbance, Unit 7, give him the address, and tell him it came from an anonymous tip. Do not give my name. Do not give yours." 20 minutes, Doe said. He did not look pleased, but he looked steady, which was more important. Jitai got out of the car. The rain was lighter now, more mist than downpour, and it settled on his jacket like a cold hand pressed flat between his shoulder blades. He walked to the gate with his hands visible and his pace unhurried. Not the walk of a man who was afraid, and not the walk of a man who was performing confidence, just the walk of a man who knew where he was going. The gate latch had a simple mechanism, the kind that could be worked from the outside with 2 fingers and a narrow object. Jitai used a card from his wallet, applied light pressure to the latch housing, and the gate swung open. He took the exterior staircase to the second floor, stepping over a child's bicycle that had been left on the landing and a black garbage bag that had split open near the top step, spilling cans and fast food containers across the concrete. The hallway ran the length of the building, 5 doors on each side, dim fluorescent lighting with one dead bulb casting a dark gap near the middle. Unit 7 was the third door on the left. He stopped outside it and listened. The door was not fully latched. A thin line of darkness showed along the edge where the frame met the door, and from inside came sounds that were low and irregular, something scraping against a hard floor, the creak of weight being shifted on old floorboards, and then a voice. Male. Thick with agitation, the kind of voice that was talking to itself more than to anyone else, working up a particular kind of resolve that Jite recognized immediately. He had been in rooms with men like this before. They were not rational. They were not open to persuasion in the ordinary sense. They had moved past the part of the evening where talking worked and arrived at the part where only force or exhaustion could interrupt the momentum. Jite did not knock. He pressed his palm flat against the door and pushed it open slowly, wide enough to step through, and he did. The apartment's front room was a disaster. Not the gradual disorder of poverty or carelessness, but the sudden disaster of violence. A couch overturned, a glass coffee table broken. The safety glass crumbled across the carpet in dull chunks, a lamp on its side still burning with the shade crushed against the floor. Family photographs had been knocked from the wall and one of them had broken. The frame split at a corner. The image, a woman and a young girl at what looked like a beach, both of them laughing, lying face up in the debris. A kitchen chair was on its side near the far wall with deep scuff marks on the linoleum where it had slid. A smear of blood started near the kitchen doorway and moved in irregular steps toward the hallway that led deeper into the apartment. A man was standing near the base of the staircase that led to the upper floor. He was large. Not as large as Doe, but large in the way of a man who had relied on size his whole life and never had to develop anything else. Mid-30s, wearing a gray sweatshirt with the hood down, dark jeans, work boots with the laces trailing. His face was flushed, and there was a shallow cut across his left forearm. Self-inflicted, Jite guessed, from the broken coffee table, and he held a kitchen knife loosely at his side, the blade angled down. His eyes were glassy and red-rimmed, the pupils contracted despite the low light, which told Jite something specific about what the man had taken that evening. He had not noticed Jite immediately. He was looking up the staircase. Amara. His voice was soft now, which was worse than if it had been loud. Baby girl. Come on down. I'm not mad anymore. We can talk about this. Jite said quietly, She's not coming down. The man spun around. His hand tightened on the knife. His eyes ran over Jite. The suit, the shoes, the stillness, and the expression that moved across his face was confusion first, then a kind of territorial aggression that had nowhere to land. Who the hell are you? Someone who heard the noise, Jite said. He did not move from where he stood. He kept his hands loose at his sides and his voice at a register that required the other man to pay attention to hear it. Where is she? Get out of my house. The man raised the knife slightly. Not a threat yet, not quite. Just a reminder that he had it. You don't know what's going on here. This is a family matter. The woman, Jite said. Where is she? None of your business. Who called you? Did the girl call somebody? The man's jaw tightened. I told her. Look at my hands, Jite said. The man blinked, looked. Jite's hands were empty, held slightly away from his body, palms open, angled forward. The posture of a man with nothing in his hands and something very specific in his intentions. I'm going to walk through this apartment, Jite said. I'm going to find the woman, and I'm going to make sure she's alive. You're going to step back and let me do that, and then we're going to have a conversation about how tonight ends. You got about 3 seconds before I put this in you, the man said. His voice cracked on the last word, which was the most honest thing he had said. No, Jite said. You won't. He said it the way a man might say the sky is not falling. Not as a challenge, but as a simple correction of fact, with such complete absence of doubt that the statement itself changed the energy in the room. The man with the knife stood in the flat silence of it for a moment, and Jite watched the calculation moving behind his eyes, the instinctive animal arithmetic of threat and response, and saw the exact moment the man decided that rushing him was the right move. Jite had been watching for it. What happened next took less than 4 seconds and involved no wasted motion. Jite stepped inside the arc of the swing, not away from it, which was the opposite of what the man's body had prepared for, and the knife found nothing but air. Jite's left hand closed on the man's wrist. Not the fist, the wrist, which controlled the hand and by extension the knife, and rotated with the precise torque required, and the knife hit the carpet. His right forearm came up under the man's chin in the same motion, driving the head back, and his right foot swept the man's rear leg, and the man went down with the flat impact of someone who had never learned how to fall. He hit the overturned couch and then the floor, and by the time he stopped moving, Jite's knee was at the center of his back and one arm was bent behind him at an angle that made breathing difficult. The man cursed and struggled for a few seconds and then went still, breathing hard through his nose. Jite stayed where he was, his knee in the man's back, his hand controlling the trapped arm, and he looked around the room with the same unhurried attention he gave everything. He kicked the knife under the overturned couch. He looked at the blood trail that led down the hallway. "What's your name?" he said to the man beneath him. It was not a question. "Marcus?" The word came out tight, compressed by the difficulty of breathing. "Marcus, I'm going to stand up now. If you try to get up before I tell you to, I'll break your arm. Do you understand?" A pause. Then, "Yeah." Jite stood. He kept his eyes on Marcus for a moment, tracking the body language, reading the decision-making in real time. Marcus stayed on the floor, which was the correct choice. Jite stepped around him and followed the blood trail down the hallway toward the back bedroom. The bedroom door was ajar. He pushed it open. Nia Brooks was on the floor between the bed and the far wall, lying on her side in the position of someone who had either fallen or tried to make herself small. She was a woman in her early 30s, slim and dark-skinned, wearing a white tank top that was no longer white on one side. Her natural hair spread around her head, her face turned toward the wall. She was breathing. He confirmed that immediately, watching the rise and fall of her rib cage. But the breathing was labored and irregular, and the side of her face that Jite could see was badly swollen, the eye closed, a cut above the cheekbone still seeping. She had been beaten with sustained force, and not recently. The swelling was advanced enough to suggest the worst of it had happened 20 or 30 minutes ago, and she had either lost consciousness then or collapsed trying to reach something. Jite crouched beside her and checked her pulse at the throat. Strong enough. Irregular. He looked at her pupils, which required gently lifting the closed lid, and saw that she was not deeply unconscious, but rather in the half-state that came from trauma and pain, the body's mechanism for managing what the mind could not. He stood and moved to the door. "Amara," he said. Not loud. Calm and direct, the way he had learned that children in crisis responded to. Not warmth, which they could not yet trust, but steadiness, which the body recognized even when the mind was overwhelmed. "I'm the person who texted you back. Your mother is alive. She needs help, but she's alive. I need you to come out now." Silence from upstairs. Then the sound of something shifting, a door, the soft creak of a child trying to move without making noise. He waited at the foot of the upper staircase, in full view of the landing, so that the first thing she saw when she looked down would be him standing in the open with nothing in his hands. The closet door at the top of the staircase opened slowly, and a small face appeared at the edge of it, looking down with eyes that were enormous and exhausted and trying very hard to determine if this was another kind of danger or something different. She was 8 years old. She was wearing a yellow sleep shirt with a cartoon character on it that Jite did not recognize, and she was clutching a cell phone, an adult phone, clearly her mother's, in both hands, and she was barefoot, and her face had the specific quality of a child who had been crying for a long time and had used up all the tears and was now operating on something raw and quieter than crying. She looked at him. He looked at her. 3 knocks, she said. Her voice was small and entirely serious. "You said 3 knocks." Something moved in Jite's chest again. He breathed through it. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry. I should have knocked." She came down the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, watching him with every step. She stopped on the bottom step, which put her eyes almost level with his, and she looked at him with the frank and unnerving directness of a child who had learned, probably too young, to read adults for signs of danger. Where is he? She asked. He's not going to hurt anyone tonight. Where's my mom? Back bedroom. She's hurt, but she's breathing. I've already called someone to help her. He had not called anyone yet, but he pulled out his phone as he said it and sent 2 words to a contact listed simply as Dr. Park, address incoming. Then he texted the address. Dr. Park had been on retainer with the syndicate for 9 years and had dealt with situations that could not be explained to emergency room intake staff. He would come without questions, and he would be discreet, and he would be here within 20 minutes because Jitai had never once asked him for something that was not urgent. The girl, Amara, was still watching him. Are you police? She asked. No. Then who are you? Jitai considered the question with more care than he usually gave to questions about himself. Someone who got your message, he said. She processed this for a moment, her eyes moving over him the way his moved over rooms, cataloging, measuring, trying to determine what the information meant. You came anyway, she said, even though you don't know us. Jitai said nothing to that. He moved past her toward the front room, where Marcus was still on the floor, now sitting up with his back against the overturned couch, his arms resting on his knees, his face doing the work of a man constructing a story. Jitai stopped in front of him and looked down. Marcus looked up. The calculation behind his eyes had shifted. The aggression had compressed itself into something more careful, more defensive. He was building a version of events that would serve him. Jitai could see the architecture of it going up in real time. I want you to know, Marcus said, that I never meant for it to go this far. She came at me first and I was just... Stop, Jitai said. Marcus stopped. The child is standing 8 feet behind me, Jitai said, his voice low and absolutely without inflection. She heard everything that happened in this apartment tonight. So did the neighbors probably. You should be very careful about what kind of story you decide to commit to, because stories have a way of becoming permanent when the wrong people remember them. Marcus looked past Jitai toward Amara, and his face did something complicated. Guilt and resentment, and something worse underneath both, the look of a man who had not finished being dangerous but understood that the immediate opportunity had passed. I want you out of this apartment, Jitai said. I want you out of this apartment right now. The voice did not change volume. And I want you to go to whatever address you go to when you leave here. And I want you to stay there. Don't call this number. Don't come back to this building. Don't contact this family in any way. You can't make me do anything, Marcus said. You're nobody. You walked into my house and put your hands on me, and I could call the police right now. You could, Jitai said. Tell me exactly what you'd say to them when they got here and saw the state of this apartment and the state of the woman in the back bedroom. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight. Marcus looked at the floor. Get out, Jitai said. Marcus got up slowly, the movement of a man whose body was sore from the way it had met the floor, and he looked around the apartment once with an expression Jitai recognized. Not remorse, not even quite anger, but the specific, dangerous look of a man who was leaving but had not decided that leaving was permanent. He picked up a jacket from near the door. He did not look at Amara. He went out, and Jitai listened to his footsteps on the exterior staircase, then on the asphalt below. Then nothing. Jitai turned to Amara. She was standing with her arms crossed over her chest, the phone still in one hand, her feet together on the carpet. She looked at the room around her, the broken table, the overturned furniture, the photograph with the split frame, and her face held a quality of exhaustion that no child her age should have had to develop. Is she going to be okay? Amara asked. A doctor is coming, Jitai said. She's going to be okay. Amara nodded once, very carefully, as if she was testing the weight of that answer before she let herself believe it. Jitai walked back down the hallway to the bedroom and crouched beside Nia again. Her breathing had stabilized slightly. He turned her carefully into a recovery position, supporting her head, checking that her airway was clear. The cut above her cheekbone had slowed. The swelling on the left side of her face was severe, but the bone structure beneath it felt intact to careful pressure, which suggested no fracture. Though he was not a medical professional, and Dr. Park would verify. He sat on the edge of the bed frame and looked at this woman he did not know, this stranger whose name he had learned 4 minutes ago, and felt the full, specific weight of the evening settling around him. He had come here without a plan, without backup, without a single practical reason that could be explained to anyone who existed inside the logic of his professional life. He had come because a child had typed "please" into a phone and sent it to the wrong number. He heard small footsteps in the hall. Amara appeared in the doorway. She looked at her mother, and her face did not crumble. She was past the crumbling, had already done that somewhere in the dark of the closet upstairs. But something in her shoulders dropped with a particular kind of relief that came from seeing with her own eyes what someone had only promised with words. She crossed the room and sat on the floor beside her mother and took Nia's hand in both of hers. She did not look at Jite. She just held her mother's hand and looked at her face, the swollen, sleeping face of the only person in the world who had always been there. Jite sat on the edge of the bed frame and said nothing. After a while, Amar said, without looking up, "Why did you come?" Jite looked at his hands for a moment. The question was simple and completely sincere, the kind children asked because they had not yet learned to pretend that the answer did not matter. "You asked," he said. Amar was quiet for a moment. Then, "People don't usually come when I ask." Jite had nothing to add to that. He sat with it instead, the way he sat with most things that were true and difficult, not moving away from them, not moving toward them, just letting them occupy the space they needed to occupy. His phone buzzed. "Dr. Park. 10 minutes out. What are we dealing with?" Jite typed back, "Blunt force trauma. Facial. Unconscious. Stable. Female. Early 30s. Child present. Come to the door. Don't knock. It'll be open." He put the phone back in his pocket and looked at the room. The rain was tapering outside, and through the bedroom window he could see the orange light from the parking lot lamp, the wet gleam of car roofs below. Somewhere in the building, a television was on, the sound muted enough to be unrecognizable, but present. The way television always was in places like this, not watched, just running, filling the silence because silence in some apartments was heavier than any noise. He looked at Amara holding her mother's hand. He thought about his sister. He always thought about his sister in moments like this, in the specific quiet after violence, when the immediate danger had passed, but the damage was still visible and still warm. Her name had been Ji Yuan, and she had been 6 years old the last time he had seen her alive. And she had looked at him with the same quality of trust that Amara had looked at him with from the top of that staircase. The trust of a child who has decided, based on evidence that no adult would find sufficient, that this person will not fail them. He had failed Ji Yuan. He had been 17 years old, and he had failed her in every way that mattered, through absence and inattention, and the particular failure of a teenager who believed that the adults around him were handling things that were not actually being handled. He had been carrying that failure for 24 years. He had never told anyone about it. Not Doe, not his attorney, not the 3 women who had been in his life long enough to ask questions about where he came from. It lived in him the way old injuries lived in the body, quiet most of the time, visible only under specific pressure. Amara looked up at him then, and for a moment they simply looked at each other across the space of the bedroom, the Korean man in the expensive suit and the 8-year-old girl in the yellow sleep shirt, both of them sitting vigil over an unconscious woman in a damaged room at the far edge of midnight. "What's your name?" Amara asked. He considered. Then, "Ji-tai." She tried the syllables carefully, twice. "Ji-tai." She looked back at her mother. "My name is Amara." "I know," he said. "You told me." She nodded, satisfied. She laced her fingers through her mother's. Outside, the rain had almost stopped, and somewhere below the parking lot, headlights swept across the building's exterior wall. Dr. Park, arriving in his dark blue sedan with the medical case in the trunk, and the discretion of a man who had learned long ago not to ask for explanations he did not need. Jitai stood and moved to the front of the apartment to let him in. In the hallway, alone for 3 seconds between the bedroom and the front door, he stopped. He pressed one hand flat against the wall and breathed. A slow, controlled breath, the kind he used to return himself to operational calm after situations that had cost him something he could not name but could feel precisely, in the center of his chest, slightly left of center, where certain things had always lived in him, whether he wanted them there or not. Then he opened the front door and went back to work. Dr. Park stepped through with his case and took one look at Jitai's face and then one look at the apartment behind him and said nothing, which was exactly right. Jitai walked him to the bedroom. Amara looked up at the doctor with the same measuring eyes she had given Jitai, and Park introduced himself in a quiet, professional voice and crouched beside Nia and began his assessment with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this in circumstances that were never simple. Jite stepped back into the hallway. His phone buzzed. Not Dr. Park, not Doe. A number he recognized but had not expected. One of his Koreatown contacts, a man who kept his ear to the ground across multiple districts and charged accordingly for what he heard. The message was 4 words. Marcus Givens has priors. Jitai stared at the message. He had not given anyone Marcus's name. He had not had time to investigate Marcus at all. He had been here less than 45 minutes, had not yet sent any inquiries through his network, had acted entirely on instinct in a way that was so unlike his normal operating pattern that it would have alarmed him if he had stopped to examine it, which meant someone in his network had already flagged Marcus Givens independently, had flagged him as someone Jite should know about, which meant Marcus Givens was connected to something in the wider architecture of Jite's world in a way that was not yet clear. He typed back, "What kind?" The reply came in under 30 seconds. Assault, 3 priors, 2 women, 1 a minor. He's been running with Devin Cross's crew out of Compton for the last 8 months. Jite went very still. Devin Cross was not a name he associated with domestic violence. Devin Cross was a name he associated with a conversation he had been putting off for 6 weeks, a negotiation over a disputed shipment route through the port of Long Beach that 3 separate parties were currently trying to claim, and which Jite had been methodically clearing the way to resolve. Devin Cross was exactly the kind of complication that meant tonight was not as simple as Jite had allowed himself to believe for the past 40 minutes. He looked down the hallway toward the bedroom where Dr. Park was working, and Amara was sitting with her mother's hand in both of hers. He looked at his phone. He looked at the front door, which was still open to the wet night and the orange parking lot light, and the city that was always, underneath everything, still running its own calculations regardless of what anyone inside any particular room decided to do. The evening had just become something considerably more complicated than a wrong number. Jite stood in the hallway of the damaged apartment with his phone in his hand and the name Devin Cross sitting in his chest like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples moving outward in every direction at once. He had built his career on the principle that information was never neutral. Every piece of it connected to something else, and the connections were never accidental. They were the actual structure of the world, the skeleton beneath the skin of coincidence that ordinary people mistook for randomness. A wrong number was random. A wrong number that led to a man with 3 assault priors who ran with a crew that had active business with Jitai's syndicate was not random. It was something else entirely, and he had not yet determined what. He typed back to his contact, "How close is Givens to Cross personally?" While he waited, he looked through the open bedroom door. Dr. Park was working with the focused quiet of a man who had stopped being surprised by the conditions he was asked to work in. He had 2 fingers at Nia's wrist, counting, his other hand holding a small pen light that he moved across her pupils with practiced precision. Amara sat on the floor beside her mother and watched the doctor with the kind of concentrated attention that children gave to things they did not fully understand but knew were important. She had not let go of her mother's hand. Jite's phone buzzed. "Close enough." Givens picks up and delivers for Cross. Not inner circle, but trusted. Cross uses him for collections sometimes. Residential visits. Residential visits. Jite processed that phrase with care. In the lexicon of criminal operations, residential visits meant exactly what it sounded like. Going to where people lived, applying pressure in spaces that were supposed to be safe, making the message personal in the way that office conversations and street encounters could not. It was a specific tool for a specific purpose. It meant someone owed something, or someone knew something, or someone had done something that required a reminder that there was no part of life that was off limits to the people you owed. He looked at Nia Brooks, unconscious on her bedroom floor. He thought about the timing of it. The violence tonight had looked at first look like domestic assault, the chaotic, escalating kind that came from a relationship deteriorating under pressure, drink, and desperation, and the particular cruelty that intimate familiarity enabled. And maybe that was part of it. Maybe Marcus Givens genuinely was a violent man with a volatile temper who had been in this apartment before tonight and would have ended up here again regardless. But the residential visits detail put a different frame around the picture, and Jite had not survived 23 years in this business by ignoring new frames. He sent one more message. Find out if Nia Brooks has any connection to Cross or his operation. Carefully. Nothing moves until I say. He put the phone in his pocket and walked back into the bedroom. Dr. Park looked up at him. She needs a hospital. Tell me why and tell me what the risk is if she doesn't go tonight. Park set down the pen light and spoke in the measured cadence of a professional giving an honest assessment to someone he respected. Significant soft tissue trauma, face and left ribs. I'm not finding evidence of internal bleeding, but I can't rule it out without imaging. The concussion is real. She's been unconscious long enough that I want a CT scan. She could deteriorate in the next 6 hours if there's anything I'm missing. What are the odds she deteriorates? With the profile I'm seeing, 30% concern, not 30% probability, but I won't tell you it's 0 because it isn't. Jite looked at Nia. 30% was not 0. He was a man who had made decisions on thinner margins than 30% for most of his professional life, but those decisions had never involved the health of a woman lying unconscious on her bedroom floor while her daughter sat 8 inches away. If we take her to a hospital, Jite said, there will be a police report. A police report means questions. Questions about tonight, about Marcus, about who was in this apartment, and what happened. I'm aware, Park said. He said it without judgment, which Jite appreciated. Can you monitor her here for the next 4 hours? If anything changes, we reassess. Park looked at Nia for a moment, then at Jite. I can do that. But if she worsens, then we take her, immediately, without discussion. Park nodded. He opened his case and began setting up the monitoring equipment he carried. A portable pulse oximeter, a blood pressure cuff, a small kit for the laceration above Nia's cheekbone that needed cleaning and closure. Jite stepped back to the doorway and looked at Amara. Has she eaten tonight? Amara blinked, slightly surprised by the question. I don't know. I don't think so. Is there food in the kitchen? There's cereal and some bread, I think. Go eat something, he said. She looked at her mother. She's not going to wake up in the next 10 minutes, Jite said. The doctor is with her. You need to eat. He paused. Did you eat dinner? A small head shake. Then go eat cereal, he said. I'll be in the front room. She considered this with the same careful deliberation she gave everything, and then she got up slowly and went down the hallway. Jite heard the kitchen light click on, the sound of a cabinet opening, the clink of a bowl. He went to the front room. Doe was standing just inside the front door. Jite had not heard him come up, which was either a testament to Doe's stealth or to Jite's preoccupation, and neither interpretation was comfortable. Doe was holding his phone, looking at it with the particular expression he used when the information he was carrying was the kind Jite was not going to enjoy receiving. How long? Jite said. 12 minutes. I figured you'd want to know what I was finding out here before the 20 was up. What did you find? Doe held up the phone, a photograph on the screen, a security camera still, the kind that came from private network feeds, which meant someone in Jite's organization had pulled it from a system they were not supposed to have access to, which was entirely normal. The photograph showed the parking lot of this apartment complex, taken from the camera mounted above the security gate. Timestamp, 9:47 p.m., 2.5 hours ago. In the photograph, a car was parked at the far edge of the lot. Dark, late model, sitting at an angle that faced the building. And standing beside the car, just visible at the edge of the frame, was a second figure. Not Marcus Givens, someone else. Watching the building. Someone was out here before Givens started, Doe said. Whoever that is. They were here, and then they left around 10:30. Givens went up around 10:15. Jite stared at the photograph. The figure was not identifiable from the angle. Partial profile, dark clothing, no distinguishing detail visible in the resolution available. But the posture was the posture of a man waiting for a specific event to begin and confirming it had started. They were watching, Jite said. Looks like. Which means someone knew Givens was going to be here tonight, and they wanted to see it happen. He handed the phone back. Get me the plate on that car. Already running it. And I want to know who owns this building. Doe's eyes moved briefly around the apartment in the way they did when he was updating the operational picture in his head. This is getting complicated. I know. Do you want me to? Not yet, Jite said. Nothing moves until I have a complete picture. Do nodded and stepped back toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. The girl called you. It was not a question. Wrong number, Jitai said. Do said nothing for a moment, which was its own kind of question. Then, I'll get the plate. He went out. Jitai stood in the wrecked front room and looked at the family photograph that had fallen from the wall and lay face up in the debris. The image of Naya and Amara at the beach, both of them laughing. Nia with her head thrown back and Amara mid-jump with both feet off the sand, frozen in a moment of complete and ordinary joy that felt, in the context of this apartment right now, like something from another world. He heard the kitchen sound stop. Amara appeared in the kitchen doorway with a bowl of cereal, eating carefully, watching him. Who was that man? She asked. Which man? The big one. He came in while you were with my mom. He works with me. Is he a police? No. She ate a spoonful of cereal and kept watching him. You're not a police, she said. It was a restatement, not a question. She was locking down facts she had already decided on. No, Jitai said. Then what are you? Jitai looked at her directly. 8 years old, and she was asking the question that most adults in his professional life had enough self-interest to avoid. He considered several answers and discarded each of them. Someone who handles problems, he said finally. She chewed, thought about it. Like Marcus. Marcus was a problem, yes. But not the kind you handle usually. Jitai paused. The child was perceptive in a way that was slightly unnerving. No, he said. Not usually. Why did you handle it then? He did not answer immediately, and she did not push. She ate her cereal and let the silence sit, which was a quality that most adults never developed. After a while, Jitai said, I had a sister, a long time ago. She was younger than me. Amara looked at him. Someone should have handled her problem, he said. Nobody did. The words came out more cleanly than he expected, stripped of the weight he usually felt when he came anywhere near that particular piece of his history. Amara received them without sentiment, without the reflexive condolence that adults offered, and just nodded once, as if the information had been filed away in exactly the right place. What happened to her? Amara asked. She died, Jitai said. Amara nodded again and then looked at her bowl and then said quietly, I'm sorry. Jitai said nothing. He turned away and looked at the window. His phone rang. Not a text. A call, which was unusual at this hour from this contact. He looked at the screen. Yoon Byung-seo. His number 2, the man who ran the organizational logistics of the syndicate's LA operation. The man who knew the location of every dollar and every person in the network at any given moment. Yoon did not call at midnight unless something had moved that was not supposed to move. Jitai answered. Where are you? Yoon said. His voice was flat and careful, which meant he already knew something was wrong and was managing the conversation the way you managed a lit fuse. South LA, Jitai said. What is it? The cross situation. It moved tonight. Jitai felt the back of his neck tighten. Define moved. Cross sent a message through Pac's contact at the port. He's pulling his claim on the Long Beach route. Entirely. No counteroffer, no negotiation, just out. When? The message came in at 11:40, about an hour ago. Jitai looked at the timestamp in his memory. Amara's first text had arrived at 11:53. 13 minutes after Cross had withdrawn from the port negotiation. He felt the shape of something forming in the dark, the way you felt an object in a room before your eyes adjusted to the darkness. Not yet visible, but present, with mass and dimension. That's not how Cross operates, Jitai said. No, Yoon agreed, it isn't. He doesn't walk away from routes worth that kind of money without getting something for it. Unless he was moving something else off the board at the same time, Yoon said, something that was worth more than the route. Jitai stood very still. The apartment was quiet around him. From the bedroom, the soft sounds of Dr. Park working. From where he stood, the image of Amara eating cereal at the kitchen table, watching him with her careful eyes. Send me everything you have on Cross's current operations, Jitai said. Financial structure, personnel, any movement in the last 72 hours. I want it in the next 30 minutes. Jitai. Yoon's voice was careful. There's something else. Say it. The message from Cross. It came through Pac, but before it came through Pac, there was a conversation. Cross mentioned your name, not in the context of the negotiation. Jitai waited. He said, Yoon paused, the pause of a man choosing words with precision, that he wanted to see how you responded to a situation that had nothing to do with business. His exact words, as reported, were, I want to see if the Korean has a soft spot. The room went very quiet in Jitai's perception, the way rooms did when everything irrelevant dropped away and only the essential geometry of a situation remained. Someone had orchestrated tonight. Not entirely. Marcus Given's violence was probably genuine, probably had its own history and its own fuel that existed independently of any outside interest. But someone had pointed Givens at this apartment, at this woman, on this night, and had then parked a car in the lot and watched it happen. And that someone had 13 minutes before Amara sent her desperate text to a wrong number already begun withdrawing from a negotiation, as if the outcome of tonight's test had already been assumed, as if they had known Jitai would come, which meant they knew about Ji Yeon, which meant someone had done research on Kang Jitai that went deep enough to find the thing he had never told anyone, the wound he had kept sutured for 24 years, and they had engineered a situation designed to open it. Yoon, Jitai said, who else knows about my sister? A silence that went 2 beats too long. Yoon, I don't know, Yoon said. I swear to you, I don't know, but someone does. And whoever it is, they spent time finding it. Jitai ended the call. He stood in the apartment for a moment with the phone at his side and his breathing steady through deliberate effort, because the alternative was to feel the full force of what he was feeling, which was not fear, he was not afraid, but something adjacent to it that was worse, the sensation of having been read by someone he had never seen, having been understood in the dimension he most carefully protected, and having been used in that dimension like an instrument. He had come here because he had made a promise to a dead girl, and someone had known he would. The front door opened. Do stepped in with his phone held out, the screen facing Jitai. Got the plate, Do said. Cars registered to a shell company, but the shell traces back through 2 layers to a holding group that Sung Min flagged 8 months ago. He tapped the screen. It's a cross-affiliated entity. Jitai looked at the screen. He looked at Do. Then he looked past Do at the open door, the orange-lit parking lot, the city that was running its own calculations out there in the dark. How many men can you have here in 20 minutes? Jitai said. Do did not blink. 6. 8 if I pull from the Koreatown backup. Get 6. Discreet. Civilian vehicles, no weapons visible. I want them covering the building perimeter. Not inside, not visible from the street, just present. Do was already dialing. He stepped back outside. Jitai turned around. Amara was standing in the kitchen doorway with her empty bowl in both hands, looking at him with the full force of her attention. She had heard him, maybe not all of it, but enough. Enough to know that the situation had shifted, that the man who had come to help them was now standing in her living room with the particular stillness of a person who had just discovered something dangerous. Is Marcus coming back? She asked. Jitai looked at her for a long moment. No, he said. But someone else might. She said it without dramatics, without panic, a flat statement, the observation of a child who had grown up reading situations and understanding, at the level of the body rather than the mind, when the danger in a room had changed its shape. Jitai crossed the room and crouched in front of her, which put him below her eye level. He looked at her directly. I'm not going to let anything happen to you or your mother, he said. Do you understand? She looked at him the way she had looked at him from the top of the staircase, measuring, testing the weight of the promise. Do you keep your promises? She asked. The question arrived in the exact center of the wound Yoon's call had just opened, and for a moment Jitai felt the entire accumulated weight of 24 years pressing behind it. Ji Yeon's face, the hallway, the rain, the specific quality of a trust that had not been honored in time. I'm going to keep this one, he said. Amara held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she nodded, a single, serious nod, and went back to the kitchen to put her bowl in the sink. Jitai stood. He pressed a hand to his jaw for a moment, the gesture of a man taking inventory of what he had just committed himself to, Because the commitment was no longer limited to a child and her mother in a damaged apartment. It had expanded in the last 15 minutes into something with the dimensions of a war, not a war of territory or money or routes through a port, but a war of information, of exposure, of a man who had been seen clearly by an enemy who had used that clarity as a weapon. Devin Cross had looked into Kang Ji-tai and found Ji-yeon, had used her like a key in a lock. Ji-tai walked back down the hallway. Dr. Park looked up when he entered. Nia's vital signs were displayed on the portable monitor, the numbers stable but not strong. The laceration above her cheekbone had been cleaned and closed with butterfly strips. And someone, Amara, Ji-tai realized, had done it before he arrived, had put a thin blanket over her mother. Same as before, Park said. She needs the scan, but she's not deteriorating. Keep watching her. He crouched beside Nia and looked at her face. The swelling had not worsened. Her breathing was slow and regular. He did not know this woman. He had been in this apartment for less than 2 hours, and he did not know a single thing about her life beyond what the state of this room and the state of her body communicated. But someone had decided that she was a useful instrument, that her pain and her daughter's terror were assets in a calculation that had nothing to do with either of them personally. And that was the kind of thing that produced in Ji-tai a response that was not complicated and not strategic. It was older and simpler than strategy. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he did not recognize, new burner, untraceable in the immediate term. The message was 3 words. How's the girl? Ji-tai read it twice. His jaw tightened. He typed back, Who is this? The reply came in 4 seconds. Someone who's been watching you for a long time, Ji-tai. Longer than you know. How does it feel saving someone when it actually matters? Must be different from what you usually do. Tell me, does she remind you of Ji-yeon? The name. In a text. From a number he did not recognize, arriving on a phone that only 30 people in the world had the number for, on a night that someone had engineered from beginning to end to bring him to this exact apartment, this exact room, this exact moment. Ji-tai stood up slowly. He walked to the bedroom window and looked out at the parking lot, at the street beyond it, at the city stretching away in every direction under its permanent smear of amber light. Somewhere out there, someone who knew his deepest wound by name was watching to see what he would do next. And for the first time in a very long time, Kang Ji-tai did not know the answer. Ji-tai stood at the bedroom window with the phone in his hand and the text on the screen and the name Ji-yeon sitting in the open air of someone else's message for the first time in 24 years. He did not move for 11 seconds. He counted them without meaning to, the way his mind had always organized itself under extreme pressure, into units, into measurable intervals, into the kind of structure that kept the body from doing what it wanted to do, which right now was to put his fist through the window glass. He did not do that. He turned away from the window and walked to the front room and stood in the center of it with the broken furniture and the dried blood and the fallen photographs around him, and he called Yoon. Yoon picked up on the first ring, which meant he had been sitting with the phone in his hand, waiting. Someone has my private number, Ji-tai said, the one that ends in 72. They just texted me from a burner. They know about Ji-yeon. A silence. Then, that number has 31 contacts. I know how many contacts it has. Ji-tai, someone gave it out, or someone with access to it was accessed. I need you to go through every one of those 31 people and find me the breach. Tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. That's going to create... I don't care what it creates. His voice was level, which cost him something. Do it quietly. Don't tell anyone what you're looking for. Just find the breach. Yoon said he would, and ended the call. And Ji-tai stood with the dead phone and breathed through the specific fury of having been penetrated at the level he had always protected most carefully. Not his finances, not his operations, but the personal. The private. The thing that had no professional value and existed in him only as weight. Doe appeared in the doorway. 6 men are in position, 2 on the street, 2 in the rear lot, 2 in vehicles on the adjacent block. Nobody moves without your word. Good. You want to tell me what's happening? Ji-tai looked at him. Doe had been with him for 11 years. He had been in 12 countries with him, had been present for decisions that no one else knew about, had bled twice in Ji-tai's service, and had never once used the proximity for anything other than the work. If there was a person alive that Jite would use the word trust about, it was Do, and he used it carefully even then. Cross-engineered tonight, Jite said. The woman, Givens, this apartment, it was a setup. Not to harm me directly, to test me, to see if I had a vulnerability they could map. Doe's face did not change expression, but his eyes did the thing they did when he was processing danger at operational speed. The wrong number. Wasn't wrong, Jite said, or it was wrong accidentally, and someone was watching closely enough to see that I responded, and they decided to find out why. How deep does this go? I don't know yet, but they know about my sister. He said it the way he said everything, without decoration, with full weight. Someone researched me far enough back to find Ji-yeon, and they used her name in a text 20 minutes ago. Do went very still. In 11 years, Jite had never mentioned Ji-yeon to him, had never mentioned her to anyone in this organization, had kept that part of his history behind a wall so complete that he had sometimes, in the worst of the late-night hours, wondered if he had constructed the memory himself. And now it was in a stranger's text message. Who knows, Do said. That's what I'm finding out. Jite put the phone in his jacket pocket. Stay here. Watch the building. If anything moves outside, any vehicle that doesn't belong, any person who stops and looks, you call me before you do anything else. Where are you going? To ask Marcus Givens a question he doesn't want to answer. Marcus had not gone far. This was not surprising. Men like Marcus, men who operated on the fuel of grievance and proximity, who defined their territory by the buildings they could see from where they stood, did not tend to relocate meaningfully when they were told to leave. They circled. They waited at a distance and reassured themselves that the distance was their choice. Jite found him at a 24-hour taqueria 3 blocks south, sitting at a plastic table near the window with a styrofoam cup of coffee and his jacket pulled tight, and his eyes doing the busy, unfocused work of a man in the middle of a story he was still writing. He saw Jite come through the door, and his whole body responded before his face did, the shoulders pulling in, the hands moving under the table, the feet shifting. Jite sat down across from him without invitation or announcement and put both hands flat on the table where Marcus could see them. Don't, Jite said. Whatever you're reaching for, don't. Marcus went still. His jaw was tight, and there was a bruise forming along his left cheekbone from the way he had met the floor, and his eyes were doing the red-rimmed arithmetic of a man weighing his options against the memory of how quickly those options had been removed from him an hour ago. I thought I told you to go home, Marcus said. I need to know who sent you to that apartment tonight. Marcus looked at him. Nobody sent me anywhere. That's my girlfriend's... Stop, Jite said. Not loud. The word just landed, and Marcus stopped. I know about Devon Cross. I know about your collection work. I know about the residential visits. He watched Marcus's face move through 2 expressions in quick succession. Surprise, and then the specific fear of a man who has just understood that the other person at the table knows more than they should. So we're past the part of the conversation where you give me the domestic argument story. Tell me who sent you. Marcus wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. He looked out the window at the street. He looked back at Jite. You don't want to pull that thread, Marcus said. Tell me who sent you. Man, I'm telling you. His voice dropped, not out of deference, but out of the real and practical fear of being overheard. You don't want to pull that thread. Cross doesn't... I'll deal with Cross, Jite said. You deal with me, right now, tonight. Who sent you to that apartment, and what were you supposed to do there? Marcus looked at the table. His thumbs moved against the styrofoam cup, pressing small indentations into the surface. He was calculating, and Jite could see the calculation. What it cost to tell versus what it cost to refuse. The specific arithmetic of a man caught between 2 dangers and trying to determine which one was closer. I was told to go to the apartment, Marcus said finally, his voice barely above the ambient noise of the taqueria's kitchen. I was told to get loud. Make a scene. Nothing past that. Just be there, be loud, be a problem. Who told you? A guy who works for Cross. Intermediate. I never talked to Cross directly. What's the guy's name? Reyes. Luis Reyes. He calls me when Cross has something residential. What did Reyes tell you about why? Marcus shook his head slowly. He doesn't tell me why. I don't ask. That's the arrangement. But you had history in that apartment, Jite said. With the woman. A pause. Yeah. So they picked you specifically because you had access and a reason that looked personal. Marcus said nothing, which was confirmation. They wanted it to look like a domestic situation, Jite said. They needed someone who had genuine history there so that if anyone looked at it afterward, they'd see a relationship gone bad, not a directed action. Marcus's jaw moved. I didn't know. Look, I didn't know the girl was going to call anybody. I didn't think. Did Reyes say anything about a Korean? The change in Marcus's face was immediate and complete. The color shifted under his dark skin, and his eyes went to a place that was not the table and not Jitai, but somewhere internal, the place people went when they understood suddenly and completely that they had been used in a way they had not understood while it was happening. He said, Marcus said slowly, that if things got loud enough, there might be an outside party who showed up. And if that happened, I should not engage. Just leave the field clear. Jite looked at him. Leave the field clear, he repeated. Yeah. The taqueria's kitchen produced a burst of sound. Something dropped. A brief exchange in Spanish, then quiet again. Jite sat with Marcus's words and felt the architecture of the evening assembling itself with a clarity that was almost physical. They had not just set up the domestic scene. They had set it up knowing Jite would come, knowing he would neutralize Marcus, knowing he would stay. And they had wanted him in that apartment, in that building, for a reason that had nothing to do with testing his soft spots. They wanted him in position. He pulled out his phone and called Doe. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4. Doe did not answer. Jite was on his feet before he finished processing the fact of it, the phone already at his ear, calling again. 4 rings. Voicemail. He was out the door of the taqueria and moving at a controlled run back toward the apartment building, his phone now dialing the next number in the sequence, the man he had positioned on the east perimeter. 2 rings. Answer. Talk to me, Jite said. Everything's quiet out here, nothing on the... A pause. Wait, I'm getting a call from... The line went unclear for a moment, static or wind or interference. Then the man's voice came back tighter. Boss, something's happening on the north side of the building. I can't raise Doe. Jite pushed through the gate and took the exterior staircase at full speed, 2 steps at a time, the rain-wet concrete slipping once under his shoe before he caught the railing and kept moving. The second-floor hallway was dark. The dead fluorescent bulb he had noted on the way in was the same, but now the working bulb at the far end was also out, which it had not been before. Both bulbs. Both out. He slowed at the corner of the hallway. He pressed his back against the exterior wall and looked down the corridor toward Unit 7. The door was closed, which was not how he had left it. He had left it pulled, but not latched. Someone had closed it. From inside the apartment, a sound, not loud, not dramatic, but specific and unmistakable to anyone who had spent time in rooms where people were under controlled duress. A voice, low and male, giving instruction in a tone that expected compliance. Jite moved. He did not think about it. The thinking was done. Had been done the moment Doe stopped answering, the moment the light went out, the moment he understood that the entire evening had been a funnel, wide at the top with a wrong number and a child's terror, narrowing to this corridor, this door, this moment. He hit the door with his shoulder at full speed and the latch gave and he was inside. The front room was occupied. 2 men, one near the overturned couch, holding Doe with an arm locked across his throat from behind, Doe's face dark with the effort of breathing against it. The other man was standing near the hallway that led to the bedrooms, and he had a gun, and the gun was pointed not at Jite, but down the hallway, which meant it was pointed toward the bedroom, toward Dr. Park, toward Nia Brooks, toward Amara. The man with the gun looked at Jite and said, "There he is." He was Latino, mid-40s, compact and still, with the specific stillness of someone trained to be comfortable with weapons in hand. He wore dark civilian clothes and his face showed nothing, not aggression and not nerves, just the functional neutrality of a professional doing a job. Reyes, Jite thought. Luis Reyes. Close the door behind you, Reyes said. Jite closed the door. He kept his hands visible, his breathing measured, his eyes moving between the two men and the hallway and Doe's face, which was doing the thing it did when Doe was conserving oxygen and waiting for a window. "Sit down," Reyes said. "Where's the child?" Jitai said. "Sit down." "I'll sit down when you tell me where the child is." Reyes moved the gun from the hallway to Jitai in one smooth, unhurried motion. "She's fine. She's in the back with her mom and the doctor. None of them are hurt. Sit down." Jitai sat. Reyes lowered the gun slightly but kept it in hand, the barrel toward the floor but the grip ready. He reached into his jacket pocket with his other hand and produced a phone. Not his own, a separate device, and set it on the coffee table debris in front of Jitai. "Mr. Cross wants to talk to you," Reyes said. Jitai looked at the phone. The screen was lit, a call active, the timer counting upward. Someone was on the other end waiting. He picked it up. "Kang Jitai." The voice was measured, well modulated, the voice of a man who had learned to use his voice as a tool. Warm enough to seem reasonable, controlled enough to remind you that the warmth was a choice. A black man's voice, educated, somewhere between 40 and 50. "I've wanted to talk to you for a long time." "Devin Cross," Jitai said. "That's right. You've had men in my network." Not a question. "I have," Cross said, without hesitation or apology. "For about 14 months. Not many. I only needed one in the right place. And I only needed one piece of information. Everything else was research." Jitai felt the 14 months land in him like a weight dropped from a height. 14 months. He ran through the timeline in his mind. Every decision, every move, every conversation that had happened in the last 14 months that he had believed was private, and felt the ground shift under the architecture of everything he thought he knew about his own operation. "Who?" Jitai said. "That's not the conversation I'm interested in having right now," Cross said. "I'm interested in talking about Nia Brooks." Jitai waited. "Nia Brooks used to be married to a man named Darnell Brooks," Cross said. "Darnell worked for me. 3 years ago, Darnell made a decision that cost me significantly. He took something that belonged to me and he gave it to the wrong people. Federal, wrong people. I handled Darnell. But Nia knew things that Darnell knew, and I've been patient about it because Nia is a civilian and I don't prefer to involve civilians." A pause. "But patience has a cost, and recently it started costing more than the alternative. So I needed to know how exposed I was. And I needed to know if there was anyone in Nia's life who might complicate the process of having that conversation with her." "You used Givens to draw me in," Jitai said, "to see if I'd show." "I used what was available," Cross said. "Marcus had history there, which gave it authenticity. And I'd been watching you for several months, Jitai, watching the way you ran your operation, the discipline, the precision, and underneath all of it, the thing you carried, the thing from your childhood." Jitai said nothing. "Jiyan," Cross said. The name in Cross's voice was different from the name in the text. The text had been a probe, a test of the nerve. This was something else. This was a man demonstrating that he had done the full work, that he understood not just the fact of the wound but its depth and its particular shape. "I respect what you did tonight," Cross said. "Genuinely. You came for a child you didn't know because of a promise you made to a dead girl. That's not weakness. That's character." "I understand character." He paused. "But here's where we are. You're in that apartment with Nia Brooks, who I need to have a conversation with. You've inserted yourself into something that was already in motion. And now I need to know, are you going to complicate my situation? Or are you going to step aside and let this play out the way it was always going to play out?" "She doesn't know anything actionable," Jitai said. "Whatever Darnell knew, 3 years is long enough that—" "You don't know what she knows," Cross said. "I do." "Then let me talk to her." A silence. Then, with something that might have been genuine curiosity, "Why would I let you do that?" "Because if you handle her directly, you create a problem that doesn't go away. A dead woman in South LA, a child, a pattern that feeds a federal investigation that is already looking at your operation." Jitai kept his voice level and his eyes on Reyes, who was listening to the one side of the conversation he could hear with the focused attention of a man trying to read both sides simultaneously. "I can find out what she knows. I can assess the actual exposure. And if there is none, You've spent 14 months and considerable resources to solve a problem that didn't exist. Another silence, longer. And if there is exposure, Cross said, then we have a different conversation. But you make that decision with information instead of assumptions. Cross was quiet for 3 full seconds. Jite could hear him breathing, slow, deliberate, the breathing of a man who was not rushed and knew it and wanted you to know it too. You have 6 hours, Cross said. Reyes stays in the building. You find out what Nia Brooks knows, you report it to Reyes by 6 a.m., and then you step out of this entirely. You go back to your side of the city, and we go back to our arrangement, which, by the way, the Long Beach route is yours. Consider it a gesture of good faith. And if I don't agree, then Reyes handles the situation tonight and you watch him do it, Cross said. And we'll see what kind of man Kong Jitai really is when the promise he made to a dead girl meets the reality of what it actually costs to keep it. The call ended. Jitai set the phone down on the debris-covered table. He looked at it for a moment. He looked at Reyes, who was watching him with the gun still low, patient, professional. He looked at Doe, whose face had moved from oxygen conservation into a different kind of stillness. The stillness of a man who had heard enough of one side of a conversation to understand the shape of what had just been decided. Jite stood up slowly. The doctor in the back, he said to Reyes. He's a civilian. He has no involvement in anything. When this is done, he leaves. Reyes said nothing. I need that acknowledged, Jite said. Doctor's not my problem, Reyes said. Jite walked down the hallway. He pushed open the bedroom door. Dr. Park was on his feet, pressed against the far wall, his face carrying the controlled terror of a man who had heard what happened in the front room and had not moved because movement had seemed like the wrong option. The monitor beside Nia showed steady numbers. Nia had not woken. Amara was on the bed, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest and her mother's hand still in hers, and she looked at Jitai when he came in with the full force of her attention, and her eyes did not ask a question. They demanded an accounting, with the clarity of a child who had already absorbed more of the evening's truth than he had intended her to. Jite crouched in front of her. I need you to stay in this room, he said. No matter what you hear, stay in this room. What's happening? She said. I'm handling it. You said that before. I know. He held her gaze. Amar, I need you to trust me for a few more hours. Can you do that? She looked at him with those enormous, exhausted eyes that had been measuring him since the top of the staircase, and he understood in that moment, with a clarity that was almost painful, that the question she was actually answering was not whether she trusted him, but whether she had any choice but to, which was a different question entirely, and a much lonelier one. She nodded. Jite stood. He looked at Park. Stay with them. Lock this door after I leave. Open it only for me. Park nodded rapidly. Jite went back to the door. He put his hand on the frame. Behind him, the monitor beeped its slow, steady rhythm, and Amara sat with her mother's hand, and the rain had completely stopped outside, and the city was moving toward 4 a.m. with the indifferent momentum of a thing that did not care what happened inside any particular room. He had 6 hours to find out what a woman who was barely conscious knew about a dead man's federal dealings. And whatever he found, he already understood that Cross was not going to let any answer be the right one, because the conversation on the phone had not been a negotiation. It had been a closing of the trap. Jitai stood in the hallway outside the bedroom door and listened to the lock turn on the other side and thought about traps. Not the mechanical kind. The kind built from information. From knowing a man well enough to predict which door he would walk through when you opened it, which obligation he could not refuse when you placed it in front of him, which wound would bleed if you pressed it at the right angle. Cross had built this trap over 14 months with a patience that Jitai recognized because it was the same patience he used himself, and that recognition did not produce admiration. It produced something colder and more focused. He walked back to the front room. Reyes was standing where he had left him, the gun now holstered but the jacket open, the handle visible. The man holding Doe had released him when Jitai came back through, and Doe was sitting on the arm of the overturned couch, rotating his neck slowly, the bruising along his throat already visible in the dim light. He looked at Jitai, and Jitai looked back, and something passed between them that required no words. An inventory, a confirmation, a shared understanding of the geometry of the situation. I need 2 hours before I wake her, Jitai said to Reyes. Her condition is not stable enough for questioning yet. You push this before she's conscious and coherent, and whatever she tells you is worthless. Reyes looked at him for a moment. 2 hours. 2 hours. Reyes moved to the window and looked out at the street. His second man, younger, heavier, with the watchful economy of movement that came from training rather than experience, positioned himself near the front door and leaned against the wall. Not aggressive, just present, just making sure the geometry of the room stayed the way it was. Jitai sat down on the only chair that was still upright, near the kitchen doorway, and took out his phone. He had one move. He had seen it clearly on the walk back from the taqueria, before Reyes and the gun and the phone call had collapsed the available space around him, and it was still there, still viable, but it required a timing he could not fully control and a trust he was not certain was still intact. He pulled up Yoon's number and typed, not a call. A call would be heard, but a text, short and specific. Breach. Find it now. I need a name in 90 minutes. Then he typed a second message to a different contact, a man whose name appeared in his phone as simply HK, a designation that referred neither to the man's name nor to Hong Kong, but to a private arrangement that had existed for 7 years and had never been activated in a domestic context. The message was 4 words: Figueroa, South, now, quiet. He put the phone face down on his knee and looked at the wall. Doe was watching him from the couch arm with the patient focus of a man waiting for the signal. Jitae looked at him once, a look that communicated, not yet, and Doe gave a single nod and looked at the floor. The apartment settled into a waiting silence. The dead fluorescent in the hallway outside gave a faint electrical tick every few minutes. Somewhere in the building below, a door opened and closed. Reyes stood at the window, still and watchful, the kind of man who was comfortable in silence because silence was just another operational environment. At 4:17, Nia Brooks woke up. Jitae heard it, a sound from the bedroom, something between a gasp and a groan, the involuntary vocalization of a body returning to consciousness through pain. He was on his feet and at the bedroom door before Reyes had fully turned from the window. I'll go in alone, Jitae said. Reyes looked at him. You send your man in there with a gun, and she shuts down, Jitae said. You get nothing. Let me go in alone. Reyes measured this for a moment, then nodded. Jitae knocked once and said his name quietly and heard Park's voice, then the lock. He went in. Nia was trying to sit up. Park had an arm behind her, supporting, and Amara had moved from the bed to crouching directly in front of her mother's face, both of the girl's hands holding one of Nia's, her voice low and rapid. Mom, it's okay. You're okay. I'm here. The compressed reassurance of a child who had been rehearsing it in her head for 2 hours. Nia's one good eye found Amara first. She made a sound that was not a word, just breath shaped by relief, and her hand tightened on her daughter's. Then her eye found Jitae, and the relief became something else. The specific wariness of a woman who had learned to assess unfamiliar men quickly and accurately. Who are you? She said. Her voice was rough, compressed by the swelling on the left side of her face. My name is Jitae. I came when Amara called. Nia looked at Amara, who nodded. He came, Mama. He made Marcus leave. Nia closed her eye for a moment. When she opened it again, she was tracking the room, the doctor, the monitoring equipment, the state of her own body, the quality of the light, the sounds from elsewhere in the apartment. She was doing what Jitae did, cataloging, measuring. There are men in my front room, she said. It was not a question. Yes, Jitae said. Are they here for me? He looked at her directly. I'm not going to lie to you about your situation, but I need you to hear everything before you react to any part of it. Can you do that? Nia looked at him for a long moment. Her face was badly damaged. The swelling around the left eye had closed it completely. The butterfly strips above her cheekbone pulled the split skin together over a bruise that had gone deep purple, but her expression was clear. Whatever the pain was doing to her body, her mind was present and working and far ahead of where most people would have been in her condition. Amara, she said, go stand by the window. Mom, baby, window. Amara went to the window. She stood with her back to it and her arms crossed and her eyes on Jitae, clearly intending to hear everything regardless. Jitae crouched in front of Nia. He told her about Devon Cross in 5 sentences and watched her face as each sentence arrived, And what he saw in her face was not the shock of new information, but the specific, exhausted recognition of someone hearing confirmation of something they had known was coming for 3 years. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Darnell told me not to keep it. I told him I didn't. I lied." Jite went still. "What did you keep?" "A drive. External. He gave it to me 6 months before everything happened. Said it was insurance. Said if anything ever happened to him, I should use it." She paused, breath compressed by the rib pain. "I kept it because I was scared. And then after he was gone, I was more scared and I didn't know who to trust with it. And so I just kept it." "Where is it?" She looked at Amara, then back at Jite. "Inside the lining of Amara's backpack, the school one. It's in the closet in her room." Jite straightened. The drive existed. Cross had been right to be patient, had been right to assess the exposure as real, and the calculation Jite had offered him on the phone, "Let me find out what she knows," had just arrived at an answer that made the next 6 hours significantly more dangerous than the last 6. He looked at Park. "Stay with her." He went to the door, knocked, waited for Reyes's voice, and stepped out. Reyes read his face immediately. "She knows something." "There may be a drive," Jite said. "I need to find it before I can tell you what's on it." Reyes picked up his own phone and turned away to make a call. And while his back was turned and his second man's eyes were on Reyes, Jite looked at Doe. He moved 2 fingers against his thigh, a gesture so small it would have meant nothing to anyone who had not spent 11 years developing a private vocabulary with this man. Doe's eyes registered it without his face changing. Jite went to the room that was Amara's. It was small and orderly in the way that children's rooms were orderly when their parent worked hard to give them normalcy. A narrow bed with a bright orange comforter, a shelf of books that were well read, a poster of a solar system chart on the wall. The closet door was open. On the floor, a purple backpack with a keychain of small animals attached to the zipper. He picked it up. He ran his fingers along the bottom lining, pressing carefully, and felt it immediately. A small rectangular hardness sewn into the lining at the rear panel, accessible through a seam that had been restitched by hand, the stitching slightly different from the original. He pressed his thumb against it. The drive was roughly 2 inches long, standard external format. Behind him, Reyes appeared in the doorway. "I'll take that," Reyes said. Jite turned around with the backpack in his hand. "You'll take it to Cross, and Cross will decide there's no reason to let these people walk out of here cleanly." "That's not your call." "I'm making it my call." The 2 men looked at each other across the small, bright room with its orange comforter and its solar system poster, and the air between them had the specific density of a situation that was about to resolve in one direction or another without the possibility of a middle outcome. Reyes's hand moved toward his jacket. From the front room, a sound, sudden, compressed, the sound of furniture moving fast and weight meeting the floor. Reyes turned his head toward it for 1 second, which was what Doe had been waiting for, what Jite had signaled for, and 1 second was enough. Jite moved. He had the backpack in his left hand and he swung it as a distraction, not to connect, but to occupy Reyes's attention for the fraction of a second it took to close the distance. And then he was inside Reyes' reach, and the gun was the priority. His right hand found the wrist above the holster as Reyes' hand closed on the grip, and the struggle for the weapon was brief and brutal and loud. They hit the closet door, knocked the shelf, the books coming down, and Jite drove his elbow up into Reyes' chin once, hard, the impact traveling through his own arm to the shoulder, and Reyes' grip went loose, and Jite took the gun. He stepped back. He had the gun. Reyes was against the wall with one hand on his jaw, eyes clearing, the professional assessment already running behind them, counting options, measuring distance, deciding. "Don't!" Jite said. He was breathing harder than he wanted to be. From the front room, silence, which meant either Doe had handled the second man or the second man had handled Doe, and Jite did not know which yet. "Doe," he called, a beat. Then, "Here." Doe's voice strained but present. "He's down." Reyes looked at the gun in Jite's hand, then at Jite's face. He was doing the full calculation now, Cross, the call that would need to be made, what this meant for the arrangement and for the people in this apartment, and for the particular position of a man who had just lost control of a situation he was supposed to be managing. "You understand what you just did," Reyes said. "I understand exactly what I did," Jitai said. "Get on the floor, hands where I can see them." Reyes got on the floor with the controlled compliance of a man who was not finished but recognized a pause in the action. Jitai stepped into the hallway and toward the front room, keeping the gun up and the backpack in his other hand, and found Do standing over Reyes' second man, who was on the floor with his hands zip-tied behind him, using the plastic restraints Do kept in his inside jacket pocket, because Jitai had told him years ago to always have them. Do had a cut above his left eye that was bleeding freely down the side of his face, and he was breathing in the careful way of someone managing rib pain, but he was standing. "Car's here," Do said. "HK, 2 men, street level." Jitai nodded. He looked at the backpack in his hand, the drive inside it. He thought about what was on it, what Darnell Brooks had recorded or collected or preserved that was worth 3 years of Cross's patience and tonight's elaborate machinery. He went back to the bedroom. Nia was sitting up fully now, one hand pressed against her ribs, her good eye tracking Jitai as he came through the door with a gun in one hand and her daughter's backpack in the other. Amara was beside her on the bed. Neither of them spoke. Jitai set the gun on the dresser. He set the backpack down and carefully worked the restitched seam open with his thumbnail until the drive came free in his palm. He held it up so Nia could see it. "Your husband put this together as insurance," he said. "Cross has known it exists for 3 years. Tonight was Cross's move to find out if it was still a threat." He looked at her. "What's on it?" Nia held his gaze. "Everything," she said. "Financial records, transaction logs, 3 names in the DA's office that Cross has on payroll, the route structure through Long Beach going back 5 years, voice recordings." She paused. Darnell was careful. He was stupid about a lot of things, but he was careful about this. Jitai closed his hand around the drive. The weight of it was nothing, a few grams of plastic and metal. But what it contained had a different kind of mass entirely, the mass of a thing that could destroy a criminal organization or be used to leverage one, depending entirely on who held it and what they decided to do with it. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. "Yoon, found it, the breach. You're not going to want to hear this." Jitai looked at the message for 1 second, then typed back. "Tell me." The reply came in under 10 seconds, and it was a name. And when Jitai read the name, every assumption he had made in the last 4 hours reorganized itself around a new and considerably darker center, because the name Yoon had sent was not a peripheral contact, not a low-level network member who had been flipped for money or threats. It was Sung Min, his attorney, the man who had handled every legal structure of the syndicate's LA operation for 9 years, who knew not just Jitai's private phone numbers, but the full financial and operational architecture of everything Jitai had built, and who had, according to Yoon's message, been in contact with a cross-affiliated intermediary for 16 months, 2 months longer than Jitai had believed the breach had existed. 16 months. The Long Beach negotiation, the territorial agreements, the financial restructuring of the last 2 quarters, all of it had moved through Sung Min's office. All of it had been visible to Cross. All of it had been used to map Jitai's operation with a precision that no outside party should have had. And Sung Min had been in the room tonight, before Jitai left for the apartment. Sung Min had been at the table in the private restaurant when Jitai concluded the distribution network meeting, and he had watched Jitai leave, and he had known where Jitai was going because the text had come in on a phone that Sung Min had the number for. Jitai put the phone in his pocket. He looked at Nia. He looked at Amara. He looked at the drive in his hand. He looked at Dr. Park, who was doing the work of a man who wanted very badly to be somewhere else, but was held in place by professional responsibility and something that looked, in the low light of the room, a great deal like basic human decency. He thought about Cross, who was somewhere in the city right now waiting for Reyes to call. When the call did not come, Cross would move. Not immediately. He was a patient man that had been established, but within the hour. He would move with resources that Jitai had not fully mapped, through channels that Sung Min had made available, toward an apartment building on Figueroa that Cross now knew contained a drive with the power to dismantle everything he had built. Jitai had the drive. He had 2 of Cross's men neutralized. He had HK and two men on the street and Doe standing in the front room with blood on his face and working hands. What he did not have was time. And what he did not have, for the first time in a professional life built on complete informational control of every situation he entered, was certainty about the loyalty of the ground beneath his feet. He looked at Amara, who was watching him with the same quality of attention she had given him all night, and she said quietly, as if she had been reading the room the same way he had, "What do we do now?" Jitai looked at the drive, then at the door, then at the window, through which the first pale suggestion of pre-dawn gray was beginning to separate itself from the black of the Los Angeles sky. "We move," he said. "Right now. All of us." He was already at the dresser, picking up the gun, already running the next 60 seconds in his mind. The hallway, the staircase, HK's vehicle, the route north toward the safe property in Silver Lake that only 4 people in his organization knew existed, one of whom was now confirmed as a traitor. When his phone rang, not Yoon, not HK, not any number in his contacts, the same burner number that had sent him Ji Yeon's name 2 hours ago. He looked at the screen. His thumb moved over the answer button. The phone rang again. Outside, on the street below, the sound of car doors. More than 2. Jitae answered the phone. "Don't go out the front," the voice said. It was not cross. It was a woman's voice, low and precise, with the clipped cadence of someone who had learned to communicate in compressed intervals. "The cars on the street are crosses. 4 men, 2 vehicles. He moved faster than you expected because Reyes had a secondary check-in protocol. When he missed it, cross-deployed." Jitae stood in the bedroom doorway with the gun in one hand and the phone in the other, and his mind running the building's layout against what the voice was telling him. Who is this? Someone who has been inside Cross's operation for 11 months. Federal. I'm the reason Darnell Brooks's drive matters. We've been building the same case from the outside that he built from the inside, and we're close enough that Cross moving tonight is a problem for my timeline. You're the reason he moved tonight, Jitae said. Cross felt the pressure closing and decided to eliminate the loose end before it connected to what you're building. A half-second pause. Yes. And you've been watching my involvement since I arrived. Since before you arrived. We had a wire on Reyes. We heard the call to Marcus. Another pause, fractionally longer. I know what the wrong number cost you to answer. I'm not going to pretend I don't. Jitae processed this without letting it slow him. An 11-month federal operation meant there was a case file, a supervising agent, a chain of authorization. It also meant there was a reason she was calling him on a burner instead of announcing her presence and moving her people into the building, and that reason was either procedural, she needed the drive-through legitimate chain of custody, or something more complicated about what her operation could and could not officially acknowledge. What do you need? He said. Get the woman and the child out the back. There's a service exit at the end of the second-floor hall that opens to the rear alley. I have one person in the alley. Gray jacket. She'll identify herself as Carver. She takes the woman and the child. They'll be safe, medically attended, and entirely separate from what happens next. And the drive. The drive stays with you until I tell you otherwise. A beat. Cross's men are going to come through that front door in the next 4 minutes. Your people on the street are outnumbered. I can't move my team in without blowing 11 months of work. Which means you're handling the next 4 minutes. Jitae looked at Doe in the front room, who had heard enough to be standing fully upright with both hands ready. He looked at Amara, who was on her feet beside her mother, one arm around Nia's waist, Nia standing with the compressed, careful posture of a woman managing serious rib pain through sheer will. Dr. Park, Jitae said, you're leaving now. Back staircase, rear alley, woman named Carver in a gray jacket. You take Nia and Amara. You don't stop. You don't look back. Park nodded with the relief of a man given clear instructions. I'm not leaving without knowing you're... Nia started. You're leaving, Jitae said. He looked at her directly, not unkindly, but with the complete absence of negotiating room. Your daughter needs you ambulatory. You're not ambulatory if you take any more damage tonight. The way you help me right now is by walking out that back door. Nia held his gaze. Her good eye was very clear, and what was in it was not submission. It was the assessment of a woman who had survived the kind of night that broke most people and was now making a tactical decision. She nodded once. Jitae crouched in front of Amara. She was already watching him with the full force of that attention he had been navigating all night. But there was something different in it now. Not the measuring calculation of a child assessing a stranger's trustworthiness, but something settled, something that had moved past assessment into a territory that Jitai recognized and did not have a clean word for. "Go with your mom," he said. "Stay close to her. Don't stop moving until the woman in the gray jacket tells you to." Amara looked at him. "Are you going to be okay?" The question arrived with the directness that only children and people who had stopped caring about social performance could produce, and it landed somewhere behind Jitai's sternum with more force than he was prepared for. "Go," he said. She reached out and grabbed his hand, both of hers around one of his, the grip of a child who was not asking for reassurance, but giving it, the most unexpected thing, and held it for 2 seconds. Then she let go and moved to her mother's side, and the four of them went down the hallway toward the rear service exit, Park's arm around Nia's shoulders, Amara's hand in her mother's, the sound of their footsteps moving away and then gone. Jitai stood in the empty hallway. He put the drive in his inside jacket pocket. He checked the gun, Reyes's weapon, a compact 9mm, round-chambered. He walked to the front room. Reyes was still on the floor where Jitai had left him, hands zip-tied behind his back, watching the room with the professional patience of a man who is waiting rather than defeated. His second man was similarly secured near the front door, conscious but still. Do was at the window, 2 fingers at the edge of the curtain. 2 men at the gate, 1 at each end of the building. "I can't see the vehicles from here." "They'll come through the front," Jitai said. "Cross will want the drive, which means he needs someone inside the apartment. He doesn't know how many people are in here. He'll send 2 through the door and keep 2 on the perimeter in case anyone runs. HK has 2 men on the street. Cross's people will neutralize them first. That's why they deployed 4. Jitai looked at the front door. The locks were residential quality, a deadbolt and a chain, neither of which would survive sustained force. "Move the couch against the door. It won't stop them, but it'll slow the entry and tell us exactly when they're coming." Do moved the overturned couch upright and angled it against the door with the efficiency of a man who had done similar things before. Jitai moved to the wall beside the kitchen doorway. Not behind the door, but beside it, in the corner where the sightline from a forced entry would be worst. He looked at Reyes. "Your men are coming in," Jitai said to him. "When they do, you're going to be between me and them. I need you to understand that." Reyes said nothing. "Tell them to stand down," Jitai said. "Tell them the drive isn't here." Reyes's jaw moved slightly. "I can't do that." "You can. Cross doesn't stand down. That's not how he operates. Those men come through that door regardless of what I tell them because their orders don't come from me, they come from Cross directly." He looked at Jitai with something that was not hostility, something closer to the flat professional respect of 2 men on opposite sides of the same kind of work. "You know how this operates. You run the same way." Jitai knew he was right. The front door moved. Not a knock. Pressure. The testing of resistance. Someone on the other side reading what was behind the door by leaning against it. The couch shifted a half-inch. Then it came in fast. The deadbolt gave on the second impact and the chain snapped on the third, and the door opened hard into the couch, and the couch scraped back across the floor, and the first man came through at a low angle, which was trained entry, expecting armed resistance and minimizing his profile in the doorway. He had a gun up, and his eyes were moving. Left, right, registered Reyes on the floor, registered the second secured man, moved to the center of the room. He did not immediately register Jitai in the corner to his right because the corner was shadow, and because his attention went to the larger room first, which was the correct tactical priority, but left him exposed for the 2 seconds it took his peripheral vision to catch movement. Jitai moved in those 2 seconds. He did not shoot. The gun was in his hand, and the decision not to shoot was made in the same instant as the decision to move. Because a gunshot in a residential building at 4:30 in the morning collapsed every remaining option in ways that could not be undone. Instead, he closed the distance and took the man's gun hand at the wrist and drove the arm up and back in the rotational movement that ended with the gun on the floor and the man against the wall and the breath coming out of him in a compressed grunt. The second man was through the door. Do met him. What happened between Do and the second man was not elegant, and it was not brief. It was the kind of fight that 2 large, trained people had when neither of them had an immediate route to a weapon, and both of them understood that giving ground was losing, sustained, grinding, the sounds of it filling the apartment with the flat percussion of impacts, and the scrape of shoes on linoleum, and the specific labored breathing of sustained physical effort. They went into the kitchen and something came off the counter and broke on the floor, and they came back out and Doe's cut above his eye had reopened and the blood was running freely now, and the other man's face was not in better condition. Jite had the first man against the wall with his forearm across the man's throat and the recovered gun in his other hand. He was watching Doe's fight in his peripheral vision and breathing through the ribs on his left side where the first man had managed one good elbow before losing the weapon, and the breathing hurt in the specific way that suggested something had given slightly, not broken, but stressed, the kind of damage you did not feel fully until the adrenaline left. The first man stopped struggling. Jite stepped back and kept the gun on him. "Floor," Jite said. "Face down." The man went down. Doe and the second man separated. They stood 8 feet apart and breathed at each other, both of them damaged. And then the second man looked at the gun in Jitai's hand and looked at the 3 men on the floor and made the arithmetic work and put his hands up slowly. Silence. Doe leaned against the wall and pressed his sleeve against the cut above his eye and looked at Jitai with an expression that was half pain and half the dark, specific satisfaction of a man who had come through something that did not guarantee he would. Jitai's phone buzzed. "The federal number." He answered. "It's done," the woman said. "Cross just received information that the drive is no longer at that location and that his men are detained. He's pulling back." A pause. "He won't go quietly in the long run, but tonight is over." "Sung Min," Jitai said. "We know about Sung Min. He'll be handled through channels that don't require your involvement." Another pause, shorter. "The drive. I need it to go through proper process. I need you to understand that it leaves your hands." Jitai stood in the wrecked apartment with 4 men on or near the floor, and Doe bleeding against the wall, and the drive in his inside pocket, and the full weight of what the next decision meant pressing down on him from every direction at once. The drive was leverage. In his world, leverage was survival. It was the difference between being a man that powerful people negotiated with and being a problem they solved. Giving it up meant walking away from this situation without a single asset he had not had before he walked in, having exposed his operations breach, having lost his attorney of 9 years, having spent considerable resources on a night that had produced nothing except the survival of 3 people who were not his responsibility. He thought about what Amara had said when she grabbed his hand. The grip of a child giving something rather than asking for it. He took the drive out of his pocket. He looked at it for a moment. This small, dense object that had cost Darnell Brooks his life, and Nia Brooks 3 years of fear, and Amara Brooks a childhood bedroom where the backpack lining held secrets no 8-year-old should be adjacent to. "Where do I send it?" he said. The woman gave him an address, a federal processing location in downtown LA. She told him how to package it and what name to give at the desk, and that there would be no questions about provenance, that the chain of custody would be managed in a way that kept his name entirely clear of the proceedings. She said this with the efficient compassion of someone who understood what the offer actually cost and was not going to insult it by minimizing. "The woman and the child," Jitai said, "they're clear of this entirely. They were never part of the case file. They're civilians. Nia's connection to Darnell's activities was tangential and documented as such." A pause. "They're clear." Jitai ended the call. He looked at Doe. "Can you drive?" "Yeah," Doe said. He peeled his sleeve away from the cut and looked at the blood on the fabric and pressed it back. "I can drive." Jitai walked to where Reyes was still sitting on the floor, watching everything with the steady eyes of a professional, processing a comprehensive operational failure and recalibrating around it. Jitai crouched in front of him. "Cross is pulling back," he said. "When your hands are free, you're going to walk out of this building and you're going to deliver a message." He held Reyes's gaze. "Tell him the drive is gone. Tell him the federal case is further along than he knows. Tell him the most intelligent decision available to him right now is to take the Long Beach route withdrawal and build distance between himself and the next 18 months. He paused. "And tell him that Kang Ji-tai is not a soft spot. Tell him I came tonight for the same reason I handle everything, because I decided to, not because someone predicted I would." Reyes looked at him. He won't hear that the way you mean it. That's his problem, Jitai said, and stood. He cut Reyes's ties. He cut the second man's. He looked at the two men who had come through the door, and Do had secured and cut them too. All four of them left without a word, without a look back, with the careful speed of men who understood they had received something they had not earned. Jitai stood alone in the apartment. He looked at the room, the broken table, the overturned furniture, the blood on the linoleum, the family photograph still lying face up in the debris. Nia and Amara at the beach, both of them mid-laugh, frozen in a moment of pure, ordinary joy. He bent down and picked it up. He set it on the kitchen counter, face up, where it would be the first thing seen by whoever came into this apartment next. He took one breath, then he and Do left. The drive was delivered at 6:12 in the morning to the address the woman had given him. A clerk in a gray blazer received it with a form that required no name and a signature that Jitai made illegible and no one corrected. Outside, Los Angeles was beginning its morning in the thin, uncertain light that arrived before the sun fully committed, the light that made everything look like it was still deciding what it would become. Do got stitches from Dr. Park at a private clinic in Koreatown at 7:30. Jitai sat in the waiting area with two cracked ribs that Park taped and instructions to rest that Jitai received and immediately categorized as aspirational. Sung-min was called at 8 a.m. Jitai made the call himself. He did not accuse or explain. He said, "I know, so do others. Resign by end of business today and don't contact this office again." There was a silence on the other end that contained 16 months of betrayal compressed into the space of a few seconds, and then Sung-min said, "Jitai, I can explain," and Jitai ended the call and sat with the phone in his hand and the very specific grief of discovering that someone you had trusted with the architecture of your life had been dismantling it for over a year. It was not a loud grief. It was the quiet kind, the kind that arrived after the emergency had passed and the body finally had space to account for what the emergency had cost. He did not call anyone else that morning. He went to the Silver Lake property, the one that 4 people had known about, one of whom was gone, and he sat at the kitchen table with black coffee and the silence of a house that had not been occupied in 3 weeks, and he stayed there until noon. Nia Brooks had 4 fractured ribs, a grade 2 concussion, and a laceration above her left cheekbone that required 6 stitches at a private medical facility that billed a name that did not exist. She was told she could go home in 48 hours. She spent those 48 hours in a room with a bed that was clean and a window that looked at a courtyard and her daughter sleeping in the chair beside her. And for the first time in 3 years, she slept without listening for something she could not name moving in the dark outside her door. Amara sat with her mother and watched her breathe, and thought about a man in a gray suit who had come through a door at midnight because she had asked him to. On the 3rd day, Jitai came. He knocked 3 times. Amara opened the door before Nia could get up, and she looked at him in the daylight, which was different from the orange parking lot light and the damaged apartment's shadows. And he looked older in the daylight, or not older, but more visible, the gray at his temples, and the careful way he moved with taped ribs, and the faint shadow under his eyes of a man who had not slept adequately in several days. "You're hurt," Amara said. "I'm fine," he said. She stepped back and let him in. Nia was sitting upright in the bed with her feet on the floor, her face still carrying the colorful evidence of the night. The stitched laceration, the fading bruise, the eye reopened to a slit now. But her posture was the posture of a woman who was returning to herself, re-inhabiting her own body with the careful, deliberate authority of someone who had decided not to be afraid in it anymore. She looked at Jitai for a long moment. He stood near the door with both hands visible, which Amara had noticed he always did when he entered a room with someone new, an offering of transparency that was probably unconscious by now, a habit built from a life in which rooms had to be read and people had to read him back. "The man who hurt me," Nia said. "Marcus. He won't come back." "How do you know?" "Because the people who directed him to your apartment are no longer in a position to direct anyone," Jitai said. "And because Marcus understands, I think, that the alternative to staying away is considerably worse than anything he's faced before." Nia studied him. "And the other thing, the drive." "Handled," he said. "You won't be approached about it again, by anyone." She was quiet for a moment, then, "My husband made a lot of bad decisions. The drive was one of the few smart ones, and even that was selfish. He was protecting himself, not us." She looked at her hands. "I've been carrying something he put in my daughter's backpack for 3 years, and I didn't know if it was going to get us killed or save us. And I never told anyone about it because I didn't know who was safe." "You couldn't have known," Jitai said. "No, but I should have done something." She looked up at him. "What you did. Coming to that apartment. What it cost you. I know it wasn't small. Whatever you are, whatever your life is. I know it wasn't small." Jitai said nothing for a moment. Then, "Your daughter sent a message to a wrong number. Someone should have answered it." He paused. "I'm glad I was the one who did." Nia looked at him with those clear, damage-framed eyes and nodded slowly. Amara, sitting in this chair with her knees up, said, "Are you going to come back? After this?" The room held the question. Jitai looked at the girl who had grabbed his hand in the dark of a damaged apartment and given him something he had not been offered in a very long time. Not safety, not advantage, not information, but the simple weight of one person's trust extended to another without contract or calculation. "If that's all right with your mother," he said. Nia looked at her daughter. Amara looked at her mother. Something passed between them that was entirely their own, the private language of two people who had survived enough together to have built something stronger than circumstance. Nia looked back at Jitai. "Sunday," she said. "Come on, Sunday." 6 months moved through Los Angeles the way 6 months always did. Not gently, not dramatically, just persistently, the way weather moved through a city that barely acknowledged seasons. The jacaranda trees on the residential streets dropped their purple, and the bougainvillea came back hard on the stucco walls, and the days stretched longer at both ends, and the city kept its permanent noise and its permanent amber light, and its permanent indifference to any individual story occurring within it. Nia Brooks started a job at a nonprofit legal aid organization in Culver City, doing intake coordination for families navigating housing disputes. She was good at it in the specific way that people who had lived inside difficult systems were good at understanding them from the client side. She knew what the paperwork felt like when you were the one holding it. She rented a 2-bedroom in a quieter neighborhood, with a front porch and a lock she had chosen herself. Marcus Givens left Los Angeles. He was last known to be in Phoenix, working construction, his name associated with nothing that intersected with Jitai's world or Nia's. Devin Cross was indicted on federal charges 14 weeks after the night on Figueroa. The case was built substantially on Darnell's Drive and on 11 months of the federal operation that Jitai had never learned the woman's name behind. Cross was denied bail. His operation, without its architect, collapsed along the lines that architecturally sound. Operations always collapsed. From the center outward, quickly, each part's loyalty having been to the structure rather than to each other. Sungmin resigned, as instructed. Jitai did not pursue further consequences, which was the kind of mercy that looked from the outside like restraint, and was, from the inside, closer to exhaustion. The recognition that some accounts could be closed without being settled, and that the energy required to settle them fully was better spent elsewhere. Yoon found a new attorney. The syndicate continued. Doe's stitches healed. The cracked ribs healed. The Silver Lake property was sold. And every Sunday, a black car parked on the quiet street in front of Nia Brooks's rented house in a neighborhood where the jacaranda dropped purple on the sidewalk and the children rode bicycles in the late afternoon light, and a man in clothes slightly less formal than the first night, no tie, the jacket sometimes foregone entirely, came up the front walk and knocked 3 times. Amara always opened the door. Inside there was a chessboard on the kitchen table, the board he had brought on the 3rd Sunday, a simple wooden set that he had carried in a paper bag and set down without announcement, and Amara had looked at it and then at him and said, "I don't know how to play," and he had said, "I'll show you." And he had, and she had beaten him for the first time 11 Sundays later, cleanly, in a way that was not luck, and he had sat with the defeated board in front of him and felt something move in his chest that was not grief and not quite joy, but existed in the space between them where very few things in his life had ever been. Nia made food, not elaborate food, whatever was in the house, put together without performance. He ate it. He helped Amara with homework that ranged from manageable to genuinely challenging. And he was honest when he did not know something, which she respected. He did not talk about his work, and they did not ask. He did not talk about Ji-yeon again directly, but sometimes, in the particular quiet of a Sunday afternoon, when the chess game was done, and Amara was reading in the chair and Nia was in the kitchen, and the light came through the front windows at the angle it came at 4:30 in October, something in his face went to a place that was far away, and not painful in the old way. Just present, just there, the way the dead are present when the living carry them correctly. On a Sunday in November, Amara looked up from the chessboard in the middle of a game and said, without preamble, "Do you think she would have liked me?" Ji-tae looked at her. He did not ask who she meant. He thought about Ji-yeon, who had been 6 years old and serious and had liked bugs and rain and asking questions that adults found inconvenient. He thought about the way she had looked at him, the last way, the trusting way, the way he had spent 24 years understanding as the last image he had failed to honor. "Yes," he said. He said it without hesitation and without drama, because it was simply true. "She would have liked you very much." Amara nodded, satisfied, and moved her bishop. Ji-tae looked at the board. He looked at this child who had sent a message into the dark to anyone who might be listening, and at the woman in the kitchen who was rebuilding a life one careful day at a time, and at the quiet Sunday afternoon around him, which was the least dramatic and most unlikely thing in the long history of his unlikely life. He had not become a different man. He was still what he was. The syndicate still ran. The world he operated in was still the world it was, and the distance between that world and this kitchen table was not a distance he could honestly say he had bridged. He had not transformed. He had not been redeemed in any clean or final way. But something had changed in the specific structural sense. Some weight that he had been carrying in the left center of his chest for 24 years had shifted. Not lifted entirely, but shifted, redistributed, made somehow manageable in a way it had not been before. Ji-yeon had trusted him once, and he had not been there. Amara had trusted him once, and he had. That was not nothing. In the accounting of a life like his, that was not nothing at all. He moved his knight. Amara studied the board with her chin in her hand and her eyes doing the work he recognized. Cataloging, measuring, finding the line through the problem. She was going to win again. He could see it already. He let her.